Hi, I'm your host Josh Turner, and for the last 9 years, I've been working with leaders to build high-performance teams that help turn their vision into reality. This is Uncommon Ground, the podcast where we sit down with bold thinkers, unconventional leaders, and builders who challenge the status quo. Today's guest is Jonathan Shearman, a leadership advisor and executive coach with decades of real-world experience, helping senior teams navigate change, grow intentionally, and lead with clarity. He's worked at board level across complex global operations, driving leadership development and cultural transformation from the inside out. In this episode, we unpack why change so often fails, what teams need to succeed, and the internal barriers that stop leaders from growing, even when they want to. If you're leading through change, scaling a team, or trying to build something that lasts, this conversation will give you insight, language, and frameworks that make a difference. Let's dive in. Oh, Jonathan, it's great to have you with us today on Uncommon Ground. I've known you for some time, and I will say this, that you are one of the most interesting people in my life, and you've been a great help to me. But when I email you, your email address is jonathan@amorethand.co.uk. What's that all about?
Yeah, so that's the limited company. I have a personal email, but that's the limited company. And that very much comes from an equation. What you know about me and what everybody else probably will work out reasonably quick if they hang around for 3/4 of an hour is I am very left-brained, he says, picking up his right hand. Very left-brained, very diagrammatical, very sequenced. It's how the world makes sense. I attach to content, not people. We might get to that. And so most of the things that have meaning for me come from an equation or a sequence or a diagram. And so we have a flip chart, which honestly one of my best friends. Flip chart is one of my best friends. And so A more than D comes from this equation, which is A plus B plus C greater than or equal to D. Let me just say, I excuse my writing. I'm left-handed, but I can't write with my left hand on a flip chart. So that's my wrong hand doing its best. So if I work you through this, and obviously you've got an A more than D, but we've got B and C before we get to just having A and D. So let me start with C and tell you what this is. If you listen to the words, then the writing makes sense, because the writing doesn't always make itself legible. So this is next steps.
Yep.
So this idea, as you think through this, the last thing you'll come to is what's a next step.
Sure.
And so we'll get to that. B is a vision of something better. So what would a future look like?
Yeah.
What could this look like? And part of what I'm relearning in probably even just the last few months is when I've taught this before and shared it, because part of why I think I'm on the planet, certainly in my 50s now, is just to give stuff away that I think is useful.
Yeah.
And so typically I've rushed to A and D and I've said next steps is fine, vision is easy, we can come up with that, and that gets me to A and D. And I'm going to do that in a minute. But what I've seen again recently is the size of our vision makes a real difference. Yeah. So if we only throw ourselves and cast ourselves and our team a small vision, then it's not going to be very magnetic. It's not going to be very impactful. Yeah. The bigger the vision, and I'm not talking about blab it and grab it. Yeah. I'm talking about something that's within reach but might be a stretch. It makes a difference. Anyway, so if I say those are things and now just say, let's take those out, then you're left with A and D. So A is greater than D. And this whole thing is around change. Yeah. So A is our dissatisfaction. Big words, can't remember how many S's are in satisfaction, so I'm not even going to try because I'd embarrass myself. Dissatisfaction with the status quo.
Okay.
How upset am I about now? Yeah. How uncomfortable is now? How not okay is now? Yeah. And D is the cost of change. And so A more than D is my way of saying to people, we change when our dissatisfaction is greater than the cost of change. Yeah. And only then. And these things weigh in. And then if you think about it, you can then dial in next steps. Yeah. So I give you an example. I'll give you a personal example and then I'll try and give you a business example. part of my iterations of life, and we can talk about that if it's helpful for you guys. I've had a series of kind of epiphanies, really, where I've just made step changes in how I behave. And one of those was when I decided that it wasn't that I didn't want to work full time anymore. It was that I wanted to be a husband and a dad and give time away to charity and to people. And so there was only one way to do that, which was to change jobs. Yeah. Because I was stockbroking at the time. I was heading up a trading desk, and I said to my chief exec, hey, do you want 3 days a week? And the right answer from him was no. And he said no, because you can't do that job part-time. So I went and I phoned my best client, and I'm like, hey, we've been joking about me joining your team, and now I'm ready. What do you think? Yeah. Wildly intuitive, lovely person. Literally in a 10-minute phone call, I phoned him at home on a Wednesday night, and he's like, done. Wow. He said, I'll talk to HR, we'll draw up a contract. Now, what had happened for me in that process was I knew I was dissatisfied because I was just pulled too thin. I couldn't do everything that I wanted to. I was just tired. I'd done my season in there. I knew what better would look like.
Yeah, more time with your family.
More time with my family, more time to give away, more balance, more holisticity. I know people don't always like work-life balance, more holisticity. Yeah. You know, there's only one version of me. I just take it into different roles in life. And the next step was going to be go to 3 days. Yeah. And once my existing employee said no, it was like, okay, go find somebody else now then. So they said no. And so I was left with this, but there's a cost to this change. Yeah. And here's the cost. I was known as a stockbroker. Yeah. And I was good at stockbroking. Yeah. Like I was known in the country in my little niche as a decent stockbroker. My best client wasn't a stockbroker. No. It was a fund management firm. I was changing into a different lane. Yeah. So I'm like, well, I might not be good at that. I might not be known at that. So there's one thing that I had to try and take account of. The other big change was typically when you move from working 5 days a week to 3 days a week, you earn less money. Yeah. Because somebody's not so keen to pay for full time when you're only giving it 60%. Yeah. And so I'm less bothered about money for me. I'd happily live in a caravan. I'd actually happily live in a mobile home. But I had a wife and we had children. And so I just had to wrap my head around that. And so I went through this wrestle. So by the time I'd phoned my best client at home, I kind of wrestled this thing down that said, no, I am sufficiently dissatisfied that I will undertake the cost of change. Here's the really interesting bit of this, and I have multiple examples of where this has been the case. Yeah. For me at least, and you guys will have to work it out for yourselves, my bias and my wiring has me underestimate how dissatisfied I am and amplify the cost of change. Yeah. And therefore I'm held back from taking change that I probably should if I weighed these things correctly. Yeah. And so once I'd come to terms with that, then I made that change. Here's the strange part of this story, and here's what I think is a truism. I actually, not 60% at a 60% grossed up rate, at a pounds and pence rate, I earned more in my next full year working 3 days a week than I'd ever earned working 5 days a week.
And I guess your mind was saying you could never do that.
Never do that.
When you're in the A stage.
Right. And it was risk. So to be clear, that earnings was a salary and a bonus. Yeah. And it was the bonus that pushed the numbers over the top. So salary for salary, there was a decrease. Yeah. But all up. And this again is part of this holisticity that says, as I become a wholer, happier person, it ripples into all of my existences. Yeah. And so there's that. And think about it at a people level. Let's bring it back to people running businesses. Now, I'm sure we've all had to let people go. There is a version of this whenever we come, particularly either senior people. Yeah. You know, I've had to let some execs go on boards. And definitely anybody that's been around for a while where there's an element of friendship, it's tough to do that. Yeah. And so you come to this, it's not as bad as I think it is.
The cost of the conversation is more than you perceive the dissatisfaction.
The cost of the disruption. Yeah. If you change a chief exec on a business, particularly a decent sized business, there's disruption. Yeah. There's cultural disruption. Yeah. There's strategic disruption. Sure. And so you do have to work out that you think you have to make the change, but not go as far as talk yourself out of it. Yeah. And I think for a while on some of my biggest changes, whether it's in my own life or in business life, I've maybe been a little bit slow to push to the change. But honestly, the big ones I've never regretted.
Yeah, and sometimes we it takes a wake-up call, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking about people who maybe have like a health transformation and lose 10, 15 stone. Or,
Yeah.
and a lot of the times it's on the back of a health scare or a loved one dying.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they've probably been dissatisfied for a decade.
Yeah, your weightings change at times like that.
Yeah.
The things that seemed important aren't quite as important anymore.
Yeah.
You know, Rockefeller, when he died, his lawyer came into the room and one of the reporters couldn't wait for the answer, so he shouted out, how much did he leave? And the lawyer said, all of it. Not taking any of it with us.
Yeah.
We might want to set our kids up, that's fine. Might want to do some legacy stuff, that's fine. But your weightings just change.
Yeah.
And that's certainly part of my story, that as I've moved from 30s through 40s into 50s, the weighting of things that are important has changed. But that's one of the things that I consistently come back to. And to answer your question, that's why you email me like you do.
A more than D. And so how do I apply that? How do people watching apply that today, where they know there's some dissatisfaction? I think about people setting New Year's resolutions, and this is because the dissatisfaction is there.
Yeah.
But the cost is not worth
the
dissatisfaction.
Or the vision's not big enough. So typically I'd suggest that once you've got A and B and D, you can find the next step.
Yeah.
So, to your weight one, I'm losing weight at the minute. I've lost weight through periods of time. I have never lost weight when somebody else thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I've only ever lost weight when I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So here's what's got my attention right now.
Yeah.
We have a 9-month-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
And my hips aren't great.
Yeah.
And I'm carrying a few kilos too many.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the weightings of things, my dissatisfaction went up because I want to be around for our granddaughter. I want to take her to the park.
Well, the vision's gone up as well.
I want to do the things. And the cost of change, one less burger or one less something or an extra Peloton class. I'm like, sure.
Yeah, it's worth it.
I can do that. And so I would encourage people who have got something, if you think about it, you start at either vision or dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Picture something that's not how you'd want it to be in life, that you think you can do something about.
Yeah.
Now, I can talk in a minute about, Stephen Covey talked about circles of influence and circles of concern. Like, life goes really badly wrong really quickly when we spend time in the circle of concern where we can't influence it.
Yes. Yeah.
Just doesn't work. And it's a thing I do with myself weekly, because I have a weekly check-in. I'm like, where am I spending time in my circle of concern?
Yeah.
It's absolutely exhausting.
Some people call it like the reptile thinking,
Yeah.
where you're only focusing on what can go wrong and the negative. And
yeah, but things that you just, if I draw it out, it's literally, the way Covey does it, it has a circle of focus.
Yeah.
What should I be focused on? Then it has a circle of influence. Then it has a circle of concern.
Yeah.
By definition of concentric circles, everything I can influence, I'm also concerned about. But anything that lives out here, I'm concerned about it. I've got no influence.
Yeah.
Like, just don't.
Yeah.
Like, you can spin your wheels and waste a whole lifetime out there,
Well,
personally and professionally.
Isn't the world right now? We're in coming into May 2025 as we record this. Isn't our world spending a lot of time on what they're concerned about, but what they can't influence, geopolitical?
Absolutely. Now, I could get majorly concerned about whether there's a recession coming, or if I go even more meta, I could get concerned about what my girls are. We have 2 daughters, they're in their 20s. Like, I'm not sure what the world's going to be like when they're in their 50s.
Yeah.
But there's very little I can do to influence that, apart from give them the tools that I think I can, set them up as best I can, have honest conversations, be the best role model. They're the things that I can do something about. And so to the audience, pick something where there's some A.
Yeah.
Where can you verbalize where you're dissatisfied?
But to interject. So for me, let's say Craig Rochelle said, we all know 3 things that we need to change. So if I asked, we've got Kai Charlie here, me and you, we probably would all know 3 things right now that we could change.
Yeah.
And that will be true for everyone watching. How do you work that order out, and then how do you build it? So let's say someone's dissatisfied with their turnover right now in the business. But they're making profit, they're fairly happy, and they're just ticking along. You know, growth curve maybe comes into this.
Yep.
What do they do with that?
Well, I think motivation's important.
Yeah.
So I know you've said revenue.
Yeah,
Profit and cash as associations that don't just chase revenue, because
course.
that's just vanity. Let's just get that one down for a business audience.
Yeah.
But if you make it about the more meaningful metrics of profit or cash, where are you in that cycle? Why do you want more? Is what that's going to cost you worth it? And then there's also a timing issue here around filling your pipeline is probably important. Can you leverage? You know, some people, you're dissatisfied that, I mean, I'll give you an example from my consulting. You're dissatisfied that your revenue's down and you see bigger, and the next step is to go and have that conversation with the client that you did an introductory deal and now it's time for them to pay full beans.
Yeah.
Cost of change, sure, they tell me to get stuffed.
Yeah.
They all together, or they say no, or it sours the relationship, or all of that. So we talk ourselves out of wanting more revenue.
Yeah.
So it's pushing this thing through and working out where's your block.
Yeah.
And is that going to stay a block? Is it a legitimate block? Because we can't make change all the time.
Yeah.
You know, you and I would maybe get onto a thing called the AIM cube, and you and I live on very different sides of that. So you move towards exploration and risk and adventure, and I move into the direction away from risk and towards stability. So you've got your own natural wiring, but even once you've taken that into account, might you need to take a member of staff on that's going to look stupid to your bottom line in the short term, but that person's going to catalyze your revenue.
Yeah, and that's what we did in my own business in Turner and Vos, and we build high performance teams for owners, and we had to make a transition from being essentially me and my business partner being self-employed people really with a limited company to being a business and employing people in the right spaces. And it did look silly to start off with, so there was some cost to my pocket initially, but that's transformed the business and my life and my fulfillment in terms of what I'm doing. Right.
And keeping that bigger picture of, what's possible in 1 year, what's possible in 3 years, short, medium, longer term, what does that look like? Keeping checking in against those things. I think they're all important because that's how we know we're on track, and make mistakes.
Yeah.
Like one of the most important things I think in managing people is make sure they understand how mistakes are going to be dealt with.
Yeah.
If they're going to get shouted at, they're not going to make them.
Yeah.
If you're going to cover them and give them the chance to learn, people are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And we all learn and grow by making mistakes.
That's right.
So if you don't create, again, we can do some psychological safety stuff if you want. If we don't create that psychological safety for ourselves, in ourselves, am I a safe place to myself?
Yeah.
It's a slightly different conversation and we need a therapist for some of it. But even within our teams, how to create that environment where people feel free to throw out their ideas, to lean into their diversity, to make mistakes. Not to keep making the same mistake because that's daft, but to make mistakes so as to learn lessons.
Yeah. And a safe place to make mistakes.
A safe place to make mistakes.
I'm a big golfer, and with golf practice, you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone. And be willing to look a bit silly in practice to be able to perform at a higher level. Yeah. And it's the same, isn't it? We had an instance with, one of our guys who's so good, but he just made a bit of a mistake, but it seems like a free mistake. And I said, as long as we learn from it, it's such a positive outcome because it's free.
Right.
Some cost us, and that's hard as well.
Yeah, and even when they cost you, try and make sure that you're not letting people make decisions that will cost you the farm.
Of course.
There's got to be a balance to that. But if people feel they're in that environment, then people will start to flourish and people will lean into the diversity that's in the team. And that's the thing that's going to bring performance. Yeah. Might not be overnight. But,
It's true. I was thinking about that thing about vision. And Steve, owner of Nuvo, says something like you have to work out what you want from your business for your life. It's not the business doesn't run you, you run the business. And I just wonder how many people get into business and it grows into this big hairy monster. And we forget that we're in control, not the business is in control.
Sure.
And if some people are sat here today saying, "Oh, I don't know if I've got a vision for the next 3 years or whatever it might be, where we're going," how does someone put that together?
Well, so I think the first thing would be to take, what's the ingredients? I think you probably owe it to yourself to slow down and take some time.
Yeah.
That's not always easy when things are crashing on.
Yeah.
And
It's that, sorry to interject, it's that quote that makes me feel a little bit sick in my mouth when I hear it, but it's so true. You have to work on the business, not in it.
Right.
And it's one of those where it's a bit of it feels like a bit of a cringy statement. It's become a bit trite now, but it's so true.
But it's true. You're writing the checks. You're making the decisions. You might be the business. You might be leading a team that's leading a business. You might be part of a team that's helping to, whatever the scenario is, it's you guys that are making the decisions. So I think taking some time and taking a step back, balcony view, helicopter, whichever, just take some time and step back so that you can have a look across it. Maybe some external stimulus from somebody else who is outside of the cut and thrust of the day-to-day and can bring either a different perspective or a what if or a what about, somebody who's trusted, again, somebody that you feel safe with, because humility and vulnerability, massively important in business, massively misunderstood as drivers of business. And so, what would that look like if you put all of that in a room? And then again, something that I think is massively underestimated in business, and there's a Simon Sinek. I think I'm about to paraphrase Simon Sinek rather than quote him, which is, we're courageous in the company of others.
Yeah.
We make better, more courageous decisions when we've got the support of other people, whether that's a spouse, a partner, a business partner or something. The example I gave you there of changing jobs, the 10 days before the Wednesday phone call, I'd sat with my two dearest friends downtown Nottingham, which is where I was living at the time, and they had really had an ever so pleasant pop that said, it's either time for you to do something about this, or could you please stop talking about it, because we're bored now. Yeah,
because we all know people who've spoken about the same thing for years and years and years. And
going around in circles. Yeah. And that was me, and I needed that external stimulus that made me courageous, that saw me change that total trajectory of my life in 10 days. I am not like that. Yeah. I am a considered, deliberative, model it out, data, very rational person. You've seen some of that side of me. For me to upend everything in 10 days was like, I think about it now and I'm like, for me, that was absolutely nuts. Yeah. But I was helped to see it, and I was made courageous. And I just tipped. Yeah. I tipped to, I have to own how dissatisfied I am.
Yes. And the dissatisfaction, the vision, and you had the next steps.
They all come together. They all come together, and you get your greater than. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a maths symbol. That just means more than. Yes. As in A, more than D. Yeah. Because Company's House doesn't like symbols like that. And I tried.
Yeah, that's funny. So, you've given us a bit of an idea of where you came from, but just maybe let us know, where are you today? What does life and work look like now? And maybe, give us a bit of a overview of the background, how you got here.
Sure. So I think I've already said I'm in my 50s. Let's not do a specific number because it's just a number, innit? But I am now in my 50s, and I was helped by a guy called Alex, who's now my mentor. I'll maybe refer to him a bit implicitly and explicitly. When we first sat, he said, "Hey, how old are you?" And I told him, which was still a number beginning with a 5. And he said, "Oh, girl, she." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "No. People might know, I didn't. I do now." She wrote a book about decades. Okay. And of people in their 50s, she says your 50s is where you either stagnate or flourish. Wow. Now, one of those is okay for me. Yeah. Yeah. Like grow or die. Yeah. And like if I stop growing, it's just not worth it anymore.
Yeah, and don't you see that, just thinking about it?
It's just not fun. But you think about people who either retire or retire early, or are just passing time till they can retire, just become stagnant, just become circular. People are going through the motions. I'm like, I'd really rather not. Yeah. So that's how I'm trying to position my 50s. And legacy has always been a thing for me with my own kids. I give a lot of my time and my stuff away. And typically the way to hook me with that is to talk about legacy.
Yeah.
And mean it, because I'm going to ask you what you mean, and I'm going to ask questions so that I understand that you do actually mean it, not that you just want something for free.
Yeah.
So the legacy thing. So I'm carving out my 50s and probably my 60s in truth as that, which means I was chairing a business that was listed on the stock market until September 2023.
Yeah.
Done that. Chaired it for about 3 years, had to make some management changes, gone through a bit of a mess. There's some growth curve in that. I would like to do the growth curve before we've done, because I think it's a revelatory for people to help them understand business cycles or life cycles.
Yeah.
And I'd done 14 years on that board, and I just knew my time was up. So
Sure.
I hit time on that, and now I've carved out this existence where I want to have margin. I want to be able to come and sit with people like you. I want to be able to share with people.
Yeah.
I love sitting with people typically in their late 20s.
Yeah.
Because by the time you're in your late 20s, you've had a decent go at life and you've
Yeah.
worked out that it's not how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
And so now you're like, right, okay, what's plan B?
Yeah.
Which actually is just discovering plan A, but that's fine because we all have a good go until we're like, doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I want to have time for all of that, and I do a bit of, it's interesting. I was going to say I do a bit of consulting.
Yeah.
I was helped the other day, somebody put definitions to mentoring, consulting, and coaching.
Of course.
And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, actually, I coach. And by
Yeah.
coach, I mean, I see what's great in you. Let me help you get that out.
Yeah.
Mentoring is, let me tell you my stories.
Yeah.
Consulting is, let me tell you my theory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can do some theory, but actually the specifics and the uniqueness of human beings and what does that look like when we properly get into it, and how do I help make you more courageous, and so I'm looking for people, if it helps, because some of what I'd want people to grapple with, you talked about vision, I'm like, get it as simple as you can and then codify it.
Yeah.
So when I go around now, I'm looking for a handful of people to work with at any point in time. And I'm looking for leaders that have 4 things.
Yeah.
They want to win with integrity, with humility, with courage.
Yeah.
And I'm told my bar's too high, but hey, I'm finding them.
Yeah, we find, yeah.
I'm not finding them everywhere, and not everybody is one, but those things. And as I track back through my dad was a leader, so I've been around leadership for all of my life.
Yeah.
I've been around business leadership for 30 odd years, and so I track back through the stories and experiences. I can see what happens when you take one or more of those things out.
Yes.
And it's just messy stories, and so.
Well, that's what I love about you, though, when, I've introduced you to one of our clients, and you've just done an amazing job, and those guys just absolutely, wax lyrical about how good you've been and transformational, actually. But what I love about you is that consultant, coach, mentor title at times can come with some baggage. And sometimes it feels that people maybe haven't been there and just want to coach. But what I love about you is you've got this background and a very diverse background, a unique background that backs it all up and is the foundation so that you can actually speak into a lot of situations.
Yeah, and a lot of things that you might not want to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's the lessons learned. Do you want me to dive back into my 30 years a bit?
Yeah.
So, economics degree, don't hold that against me. Decided I wanted to be a stockbroker. So this is 1993.
Did you move to London?
No.
We never spoke about
this. So I'm from Nottingham. We moved to Hull for university.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to come back to the Midlands. I have a passion for the Midlands. And so this is before Tinternet was really a thing, I got a book of all the members of the stock exchange in the Midlands. That's Sheffield, Birmingham, Leicester, Nottingham. There weren't many because it's London, and then if it's not London, it's Scotland. So. And I just created a CV and wrote a letter and said, hey, I've just graduated and I fancy a pop at this. I wasn't quite sure. I nearly became an accountant. That was a good day. I just lay on my bed and I was like, Jonathan, you don't want to do that. And so I wrote this letter, and I got 11 no letters in one morning's post.
Wow.
That's not a great morning.
No.
And then later that morning, my phone rang. I was in a little house in home, little terraced house, and my phone only ever rang when it was my dad checking in.
Yeah.
So I pretty much picked up and said, "Hi, Dad."
Yeah.
And there's a guy called Bill, and I'm like, "You are not my dad." I'm like, "Who are you, and how did you get my number?" And he said, "You wrote me a letter.
Wow.
It's a Tuesday. Come have lunch with me when you're next in Birmingham." I'm like, "Dude, I've never been to Birmingham.
Yeah.
I'll be there on Thursday."
Yeah.
So he decided to give me a go. They'd never taken on a grad, didn't have a job.
Wow.
But he said, "I liked your CV and I like your covering letter, so let's have a go." So I started stockbroking November the 22nd, 1993. They nearly decided I wasn't very good at that because they put me in the research side rather than the sales side.
Okay.
And I asked to move, and then I just started observing how people did it.
Yeah.
What were the things that people did that worked, and just developed my own approach to how to be a stockbroker. So started to do reasonably well at that. We moved firms, that's a different story. I ended up the head of that trading desk. And I think maybe two things to pull out of that, because I don't particularly like telling my story, so let's make it worthwhile. Why would I tell my story? So you know who I am, so you know if I've got anything of value for you guys, because you've all given your time to listen, and so I can share some of the lessons I learned along the way. Yeah. So I think two things that I learned out of the stockbroking days, that's 93 to 2006. One would be trust.
Yeah.
By the time I was running a team, I was being asked to allocate and then explain people's bonuses to them. Yeah. And numerous times I would have to sit and tell the team what their bonuses were. And, you're trying to gauge how people are feeling. So I'd be like, "Is that okay for you?" And almost without fail, across the people, across the years, they were like, "You know all the numbers. As long as it's fair, I'm fine and I trust you."
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, trust.
Yeah.
Trust is just massively important.
Yeah. What's the equation I just think of when trust is
Stephen Covey Senior, because there's a senior and a junior. Stephen Covey Senior actually is the circles. Yeah. He also, I think it might be junior, talked about trust. He says when trust is high, cost is low and speed is fast. Yeah. When trust is low, cost is high and speed is slow. Yeah. As in trust and speed correlate. When you have trust, and think about it with the people that you trust in life. Yeah. Like the cost, the questions, the what's going on in the back of your brain that says, it's just not there.
Well, someone comes to me with a business idea, a close friend, we could be doing it in an hour.
Right.
Someone who I don't trust as much or I don't know as much, and we're not going to do it.
Right.
So it's slow.
You're going to work it out.
There's
so
no
there is that
there.
correlation. Yeah. So trust is just massively important. And again, that all plays into psychological safety and humility. And there's just so many things that bleed into one another. And I think the other thing that happened in those stockbroking days was that first, like, oh, wait a minute. Life's not how it's supposed to be here. Yeah. So we were living in Nottingham. I was working in Birmingham, so that's an hour each way. I was on a motorbike by now because it's the only way to get into Birmingham on time. And I worked on a Wednesday and I flew out to America with some mates to have a weekend on the Thursday morning, and I read a book on the plane and I was like, okay. The clue phone's ringing. Yes. I'm like, rightio, somebody's just started reading my emails and I have a choice to make now. Yeah. And so I went back in the office the following week, and from the Wednesday where I was in Birmingham at 7:15 in the morning, so that's leaving home at 5:30, stock market, the news comes at 7, prices are made from 8. And then the market closes at 4:30, but I'd got into a habit of staying in the office till like 6, 5:30, and then it's an hour home. I had a wife, I had girls. I just wasn't playing those roles very well, and that's what the book was about. So I literally overnight, as in I worked like that on the Wednesday, the next working day I went in at the same time, and I closed everything down at 4:35 and I left. Yeah. And I did it for a day, and then I did it for 2 days, and then I just kept doing it. Yeah. And here's what's crazy about that, this whole, you think there's going to be a cost to it, and it's just not there. Yeah. Now, I was running the desk, but I had pretty open door policy. Nobody asked me what I was doing. Nobody challenged me. Wow. And I started writing more, not less business. Wow. Because I just found a sense of greater wholeness in myself. Yeah. You can talk about who you are in roles, but they're all you. They all come out of the same place. So that was that. And then the next stage was I went and worked for a hedge fund. So that was my best client. That's part of that story, to dial that back in, that equation. Yeah, and I think it was during that time that I probably started to tune into people who've got an idea that I'm quite patterns and sequence and data and what I would call quantitative, things you can quantify, things you can point out, things that are explicit. I think the fund management time started to point me towards things that were a bit more qualitative, implicit, people. How do people communicate? How do you profile people? Not profile in a spooky way. But how do you get a read on people? Because people behave in different ways. And so that was very much that. And so, let me throw out something else that people might be able to use. I used to go and visit companies. And so I went and visited a software business one afternoon, listed on the stock market. Our holding was about 4 million quid.
What was this to acquire the company?
No. This was so the hedge fund, between all of the funds, that hedge fund probably ran about £1 billion. So there was a small team of us running £1 billion. And the joy of a hedge fund is, if you think it's going up, you can buy it. And if you think it's going down, you can sell it. It doesn't matter whether you own it or not. You can monetize most decisions. So my pitch to the guy at home on the Wednesday was, I think we've lost the ability to go out and visit companies and just get a better understanding. We sit in the office and they give us 45 minutes and we ask our questions and we drink a couple of cups of coffee and we make our decision. And by the way, here's a crazy thing. A guy called Patrick Dunn did some work. You'll have to speed me up if I start slowing down because I've got in my groove now. He did some work on how long can nationalities park themselves. How long can I not show you my true self for? Here's the number for Brits. 45 minutes.
Wow.
So I can blag it
for
45 minutes and then the real me, if I haven't shown you the real me is going to start to bleed through.
Wow.
How long do we give shareholders to meet their management teams? 45 minutes. How long's the average interview in this country? 45 minutes. Anyway. And people can do with that what they want. And so I just said, let me go out and visit. I'll go spend a couple of hours. I'll meet some people that aren't the chief exec and the CFO. And so for 2 years, I toured around, went and did that overseas as well. There was nobody else doing that in the country. Not really the UK, and definitely not overseas. And so I went and visited a factory in China where 2 weeks before they'd sat in our office and said, there's a production line, and there was nothing.
Wow.
Like nothing.
Wow.
You could have had a game of 11-a-side football in there. It was just a big shed in the middle of nowhere in China. And I'm like, okay. Let me not do the names of the companies because I'll probably get myself in trouble. That company doesn't exist anymore. Actually, it literally went bust.
Wow.
But I went and visited the software business and we've got a £4 million holding and my decision was buy, sell or hold. And it was an afternoon and I'd started to pay a bit more attention to people rather than notes. And there was an analyst with me who'd set it up and they're talking chief exec and CFO. He's scribbling everything he hears, he's scribbling it down. I'm just watching. And they walk us through the business, multiple divisions. And at the end of one of those divisions, the chief exec looks at the CFO and I'm watching. And the look is, I hope he believes that. And I'm like, what was that? So we get in the car park and the analyst is like, man, like, that's fantastic. Like, it's going to the moon. And I'm like, okay, well, we've got £4 million holding. It's yours. If you can find somebody to buy it, it's yours. You'll have to phone the office because I can't give you an order in the car park because the rules don't allow that. But I will get word. And
so concerned about this interaction.
Yeah. So he went and sold our £4 million holding. And then he phoned me up and he's like, why did we see that differently? And I said, phone the chairman and ask him how big the problem is. And I named the division. And he called me back and he said, I've just spoken to the chairman. And the chairman says, how do you know that?
Wow.
And I'm like, and here's how I do that now. So this is why I get concerned about email and phone calls and social media. When we communicate with each other, this gives us the full range of 100% communication. And that is built up of three things. 7%, the words we use. 38%, the tone with which we use them. And 55%, that's over half, 55% is our facials.
Wow.
You want to know what somebody's saying, you have to listen, but it's all about the other stuff.
And you feel it, don't you, when you're in person?
When you're trying.
Not to go down a rabbit hole, but this is the thing with my thing with AI, is it needs to enhance, not replace. And I think we'll go too far one way and we'll try and replace. But the people who really win will learn how to enhance this, and this will still be there. Yeah,
you're not going to take people away, and without jumping around all over the place, I'll finish my story. The uncommon ground for me I think it's too much focus on strategy, too much focus on numbers, not enough focus on people.
Yeah.
But we can come to some of that if you want to. So I did a couple of years with the hedge fund and then Lehman's. So that's August 2008 for those that weren't alive or block that out of their memories. And I was in America when Lehman's blew up, watching American TV. It was quite bizarre.
It was wild. And
Wild.
How old was I? I was 18. Were you alive? 2008?
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah. Kai was just alive. Charlie, I'm guessing you weren't alive.
No, I was like 3.
Oh, you were 3. Okay, we got 2 and 3. So they didn't experience that, but that was wild, wasn't it?
Wild, and we had Blackberries in those days. There's wild as well.
Yeah.
So I had Bloomberg on a Blackberry, which was pretty cutting edge.
Well, because I'd missed the .com bubble,
No, I saw that too.
which was 2000.
99 into 2000.
Yeah, so I was
We got convinced that
10.
nothing was going to boot up on the 1st of January, and
Yeah.
people spent hundreds of millions updating software, and people made a lot of money on
Yeah.
the back of that, and a few people went to jail. Different story. So yeah, I'm watching American telly and I'm texting back. I'm like, I don't know how it's coming across to you guys, but it's absolute carnage. Like,
Yeah.
it's worse than you can
Bloodbath.
imagine. It is.
Banks don't go under.
Right. The country is close to grinding to a halt. There is no liquidity. So the company that I was with needed to save £5 million, and I didn't cost them £5 million, but I cost them a portion of that. So I was one of the people that was let go. So it was end of 2008. And then I was like, well, I don't want to go back working full time.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to be a stockbroker again, because that starts to change you. It starts to change who you are as a person.
Okay.
So I started down this road of sitting on boards, doing some consultancy, went and worked for an investment bank. I ended up being the head of securities for a year. I was like, how quickly can I pass this over? But again, to communication and to alignment, let me introduce alignment. I interviewed for the investment bank and I got on famously with the boss, and he's still a friend right now. And then he put me in front of some of his team, and I was like, I think there's probably some glitches here, but it'll be okay.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? And then so they employ me, and I get in my first meeting as the head of this lot. And within 10 minutes, I've got grown-ups standing up, pointing at people using very rude words.
Wow.
I'm like, your effing fault. It's like, it's your effing fault. And I'm like, whoa.
Wow.
Nobody told me this was what I was coming into. Forecast to lose £2 million. My job was to not lose £2 million. So I remember literally my first meeting, 10 minutes in, I'm like, all right, guys, like, quick question for you. How many profit and loss accounts are there in the room? And I'm like, I'm looking for an answer.
Yeah.
Like out loud answers.
Yeah.
They're like, 1. I'm like, how many? They're like, 1. I'm like, correct. So we're all winning or we're all losing, right? There's no winners and losers in this room.
Yeah.
There's no blame. There's no pointing fingers. We've got to get ourselves lined up.
Yes.
And we've got to go after what we want to go after.
Yeah.
And there's research that shows broad numbers. I think it's 73, but let's call it 3/4 because I like round numbers. 3/4 of things that go wrong in business go wrong because of lack of alignment.
Yeah.
So
People
when I
pulling in different directions.
People pulling in
doing
different
their own
directions.
thing, going the
Now,
wrong way.
I interviewed a guy called Duncan for a non-exec job. And Duncan had been chief exec of a business that had gone from an enterprise value, so that's the value of your business plus any debt, what it would cost you to buy the whole business. And if you've got cash, you take the cash off. But an enterprise value of, let's say, 20 million to over $1 billion.
Yeah.
He'd been chief exec through that.
Yeah.
That's pretty dynamic.
It's not bad. Yeah.
He'd done all right. He'd made some acquisitions.
That's
It wasn't all
okay.
organic,
Yeah.
but there was organic in there as well. And we were interviewing, and I said, listen, dude, you've done this for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, what's the most difficult thing that you've found? And he used these 2 words, strategic adherence. He said, we got really good at creating strategy. We got really good at communicating strategy. People just didn't want to stick to it.
Yeah.
So you just have to keep bringing them in. People want to go off somewhere and they have a bright idea. You just have to keep bringing them back. So I think that's some of what I learned from the hedge fund time, and then moving into boardrooms. And then boardrooms has just been...
Before you carry on,
Yeah.
what do we do if people are out of alignment? I mean, it's probably a bit harder if it's... I've been blessed for the last 8 years to run my business like 50-50, which is not always the ideal solution. But with my business partner, and out of the 8 years, we've been in alignment 7 of them. And that 1 year was, there was some tough conversations that we had to have to come back into alignment. What happens if someone sat here saying, like, we've not got alignment, and we're not getting where we want to, and everything's becoming a bit hard
Yeah.
because of that.
Well, understand it's unlikely to fix itself.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's not burying your head in the sand.
It's going wrong. It's just
Yeah.
a question of how wrong and for how long.
Yeah.
So get your courage, find your plan,
back
have
up.
your conversation, do your whatever. And maybe the person that you referred to earlier that I've been doing some work with that you very kindly introduced me to. I said, hey, dude, what do I share? And he was like, the wise, foolish and evil thing from Henry Cloud.
Yes.
So let me share that because it's clearly something that's made a massive difference to him. So, and you can Google this, Dr. Henry Cloud, he wrote a book on boundaries. He's done some amazing work. And he talks about in each of us, so he doesn't call people wise, foolish or evil. He says in parts of us, we have wise, foolish parts. For evil, he's very quick whenever he does it. He says for truly evil people, we have lawyers and the police.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't engage.
Yeah.
That's how you deal with those people. So now you're just left with wise and foolish.
Yes.
And to this point that I have wise bits of me and foolish bits of me.
Yeah.
But he says, here's how you know the difference. Because to get alignment, you would be really wise to know if you're dealing with a wise person where it's just got out of shape,
Yeah.
or a foolish person and you got something different on your hands. And so he says, this is how you know the difference. When you shine a light on a wise person adjusts.
Yeah.
When you shine a light on a foolish person adjusts the light.
Yeah.
They deflect, they blame, they point somewhere else. It's never me.
Yeah.
And so he goes on to say, because that can't be the end of the story, he goes on to say, so for a foolish person, if you see them deflect the light, more than once, less than 4 times, I would say,
Yeah.
give them 2 or 3 goes if you have to, then you have to move to consequences.
Yeah.
It's like, we keep talking about this. You're not changing.
Yeah.
So now we have to move to consequences.
Yeah.
And consequences isn't always what people expect.
Of course.
We don't always need to jump to P45s
No.
or whatever, but there do have to be
There's
consequences.
steps.
There's steps towards, because there's too much at stake.
Yeah.
If your alignment in your business, top team, wherever, if it starts to go, things will just unravel. Your psychological safety will go, your expression of diversity will go, your creativity will go, your trust will go.
Yeah.
It's just all the time in business, you've either got momentum or you've not got momentum.
Yes.
It's one of those two things. There
Yeah.
is no stationary.
And when you've got momentum, it feels like you can never lose it. And when
Right.
you've not got momentum, it feels like you can never get it.
Right. And it's tough. And wrestling back
Yeah.
when you've lost momentum
Yes.
is really tough.
Yeah.
But it is possible, and the sooner you realise that that's the job in hand, the less difficult it is.
Yeah.
It's never going to be easy, but
Yeah.
the less difficult it
Yeah.
is.
So thinking about all that, talking about the qualitative, quantitative, you came onto this thing called AIM Cube,
Yeah.
AEM Cube,
Yeah.
QI, all that stuff. Why don't you just talk to us about
Yeah.
how that's transformed your thinking?
Yeah.
And also helped businesses.
Yeah, so maybe let me start, because I've referenced the growth curve, and the growth
Yes.
curve is implicit,
Of course.
certainly within the AIM Cube. So the growth curve says this.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Also called the S curve because it's shaped like an S. And it says that as we move through time, on this end is the start.
Yeah.
So this is people like you, because we've tested you. Don't have to talk about your profile because that's yours, but we've tested you. People who like risk, people who are about ideas, people who like starting things, entrepreneurs, people who like getting things going. Up here are people like me that like optimizing things.
Yeah.
I don't like it down here. I understand it's a necessary part. And so you get these stages through it where this thing moves through.
Now, here's the thing about life cycles, businesses.
Yeah.
You're moving through the whole time.
Yeah.
You can't freeze the growth curve in a business.
Yeah.
As a person, you have a preference for where you
want the curve to be because you have a natural disposition.
Yeah.
And so there's tests for that and you can work out where you are. But this thing is moving the whole time.
Yeah.
And so back to alignment, I did a piece of work last year where, as far as I can now tell, it wasn't the conversation we had, but as far as I can now tell, a new chief exec brought me in to basically spend a day and a half scaring his new team that they were about to fall off the end of their curve.
Wow.
But here's what happened when I tested where people thought they were, because
I have a simple test for this. There are 8 phases.
Yes.
So if you think about it as seasons,
spring, summer, autumn, winter. So you get early spring, late spring. So 8 phases. He pulled 16 people together, and I had 16 people run the test to say where they thought the business was on the growth curve. And between 16 of them, they covered 5 of the 8 phases.
Wow.
You got no chance.
Yeah.
If your people think you're in 5 different places, because wherever you are, so the first 2 is ideas.
Yes.
The second 2 is investment.
Yeah.
The top of the second half is scale up.
Yeah.
And then you get maturity.
Yeah.
So wherever you are starts to doesn't dictate, but it suggests what you should be doing now.
Yeah.
And what you'll need to do next.
Yeah.
So if you've got people who are down in ideas and you've got people who are at maturity, which there was, I'm like, and so, I had a sheet for a day and a half, and I'm like, okay, possible next steps, because there has to be next steps, otherwise just spinning our wheels. I'm like, you guys need to get in a room and decide where you actually are on the growth curve.
Yeah.
And the chief exec knew that they were at the top. And
Yes.
for me, he was right.
Yeah.
I knew the business a little bit. But he needed his people to catch up.
Alignment.
Because what happens here, and I don't draw it because it's just not very polite, you just roll over and you go into decay.
Kodak.
Yeah.
I mean,
BlackBerry. I mean, it's just a ton of them.
BlackBerry, yes.
Just a ton of them.
Like, so, it could never go wrong.
Right. And I mean, somebody actually had the Polaroid camera and turned it down as technology, didn't they? Somebody who had old-fashioned development. And that's not the end of it. So the growth curve
it says somewhere here, you need to create a new curve, and then you jump to a new curve, and
that's how you keep a business growing and progressing. That can be a bit scary.
Well, what are the mugs? Those mugs that everyone has now. They were Stanley Cups. Stanley Cups is probably that, where they optimised for, wasn't it for like, industry type stuff, construction, and then all of a sudden they've got to this growth curve. All of a sudden, someone who's come in marketing, marketed it to, mainly women, I guess, of a certain age, and it's gone mad.
Right.
And they've gone on a new growth curve in a complete different
And
market.
if you don't do it, a competitor's going to do it.
Yeah.
That's why you can't stand still.
Yeah.
Your people, a competitor, this thing's moving through the whole time. And so I thought you were talking about, I have a mug at home that says, I know stuff and drink coffee.
No, not that one.
Not talking about that. Comes out when I'm feeling quite...
This is as well why people say this: the people that started you on the journey aren't often the people that are going to go to the next stage and cement you in the journey.
You should say that. So the thing that really got my attention when I was chairing the business, because it had rolled off the end of its growth curve and I could not get management's attention. I was non-exec. I had some influence, but I couldn't start demanding and dictating strategy and hiring and firing people. So for quite a while, I was like, we're running out of curve. I didn't quite phrase it like that. And what I was getting back was prove it.
Yeah.
From somebody that wanted the data, and I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
But if anybody's done Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius, I have discernment.
Yeah.
It just means things just...
You feel it.
Yeah. Like with ideas, with stuff, I'm like, that's never going to work. Or do you know what? I put my own money in that.
Yeah.
It's just a discernment piece.
Yeah.
And so prove it wasn't working for me, and unfortunately that person isn't with the business anymore, and rolled over and talking to... the new team's going to take a while, because if you lose your curve, it takes a while to momentum. It takes a while to get your momentum back. But so there is this thing. So this is the AIM cube that you talked about. Let me do it in 2 dimensions, really.
It's AEM cube.
It's AEM,
if you want to search it up.
AEM is from a company based in Holland called Human Insights. Let me tell you how I came to it. So I've talked about Alex, my mentor. I met him. Fine, dates don't matter. I met him, and he drew this on a napkin in a coffee shop in London. I was like, yep. Took him on the spot. He gave me a number. I was like, okay. And here's what happened. We had an exec team, wasn't functioning perfectly. I'll probably say that in public. 6 people. So we gave him 6 first name, last names, email addresses.
Yeah.
And he went away and did this. Takes about 12 minutes. And he came back and he said, you have two fundamental problems. And I was like, that'd be nice. And he literally told me what was going on in my business.
Wow.
And I was like, how are you doing that?
Yeah.
And, he and I joke about it. It's like blobs on a page.
Yeah.
Like, because I just keep sitting with people. I'm like, hey, I wonder if, because you've always got to be curious. You can never tell people that you understand or that you actually know. And they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, oh, it's blobs on a page.
Yeah.
But this thing is so predictive. And so what it plots, so this is the growth curve. So that's why I've started with the growth curve. So this is optimization or stability. So that's the top end of the growth curve. This is exploration. So this is people that like to start stuff. This is people and this is content.
Yeah.
And so, and you have this zone in the middle, which these amazing people, Glue, Chief Operating Officer, whatever you want to call them, these guys can just look in all the directions.
Yeah.
The third dimension, because it is a cube, is, so A is for attachment, people or content, E is for exploration, M is for how do you manage complexity. And so you have this approach that says you either want to do life as a specialist, you want to be an expert, but you're not going to see it. Yeah, have a torch, get in the details. But you're not going to see a big picture.
Yeah.
Or you have people that can see a big picture but are going to be hopeless on the detail.
Yeah.
And you just don't want to ask them to do detail.
Yeah.
And so the point of the cube is you need diversity.
Yeah.
You need people in the cube. And the way this thing, because if you've got some entrepreneurs watching and listening, the way this thing really came to fruition, a guy called Thompson wrote a book called Blueprint to a Billion.
Yeah.
And he ran the numbers on 1,700 American companies, and he worked out that 70, this is way before unicorns was a word, or was a word, it just wasn't associated with this. He worked out that 70 had gone from revenue of 0 to revenue of $1 billion.
Yeah.
And he was like, what do those guys do or have that all of those didn't?
Yeah.
And his theory was they sit along the growth curve. So if you think about the growth curve, they sit and then it transposes. They sit along the growth curve. So I bumped into a guy called Robertson who developed the cube.
Yeah.
Peter, lovely person, very tiring to have a conversation with because he's got a brain like an absolute planet. And David said to Peter, hey, would your thing test for this? And he said, yeah, and I'll give you two more dimensions while we're at it. And so what they realised, I'm talking about businesses like Yahoo, Siebel, Starbucks, eBay, they're in the 70, big successful startups. They worked out that the founding teams, there was a pattern to where they sat, which was typically your founder was here. Yeah. So that's the inventor. Yeah. In Yahoo's case, that's the two guys actually who sit here who were like, oh, we've developed this code, this piece of software, this.
Look, so invested in their idea and happy to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy to explore. Start with a clean piece of paper, but do it with content. Yeah. Don't do people. Don't and I live down here somewhere. So, when I say don't do people, don't like people, I say that because I am one. And so the bright bit from these guys were, we've got this thing and we think it could be a thing, but we can't do whatever needs to happen with it. Yeah. So, and if you think about this as a baton pass through a process, they went and found a chief exec. Yeah. Now, part of the cube is it's very non-judgmental. So it says wherever you sit in it is perfect. And there are some roles that are probably easier done from certain positions.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, I want to be top right.
There is no.
Where you are is where you are.
And it's where you will be, so people don't move much. Yeah. And leaning into this. Leaning into this has been part of just me coming alive in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Because my initial response to my profile was, hell no, literally was what I said. I'm like, I can't chair companies from there. Yeah. And then I started to understand what it looked like. And you also get other people to do it of you, so you know how you turn up to other people. So I moved from somebody down here who optimizes content as a specialist. But when I turn up to other people, and maybe in this setting, I become triangle is feedback. I look far more people than I actually am. Yeah. And I look more exploratory, not exploratory, but more exploratory. Yeah. And the thing that really changes is my complexity score goes from about 10 to 90 on a scale of 1 to 99. Wow. So it looks like I can join the whole of everything up to everything else. Yeah. But I've done it one bit at a time. And so I turn up like this. Anyway, to the Yahoo and whatever. So this is your chief exec. This is the person who's going to be good at going outside the business. So these are your brand evangelists.
Yeah.
These are the people who will go and find shareholders and customers.
Yeah.
And having done that, they'll bring them back in.
Yes.
But this guy's also then bright enough to say, I can't systemize this.
No. Because they don't want the administration of
Don't
all
want the
of that.
detail.
Yeah.
Don't want the content.
No.
Don't want the optimization.
No.
Like literally 0 for 3
Yeah.
of where this thing needs to end up.
Yeah.
Once everybody's played their part.
Yeah.
And so he found himself a COO and he handed it to here. And nice clean baton passes.
Yeah.
Things get in trouble if you think about 4x400 relay. Think about 4x100 relay. It happens quicker.
Yeah.
It goes wrong when there's not a clean baton pass.
Yes.
And that means somebody's got to take it and somebody's got to let it go.
Yeah.
It's really strange how often people don't want to let go. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've got it. So this person, and then this person again was bright enough to say, yeah, I can do this, but there's no way I want to do the numbers and all that compliance-y stuff. So he handed off to a CFO and said, you get this. Now, with people over time comes the need for HR. So you get this 5 on a dice.
Yeah.
And what Thompson showed was time after time after time after time for startups, that was how you wanted your team to be structured, to be able to do your special sauce and hand off to somebody to add their bit to start to scale up. If you think about it, ideas, investment, scale up maturity. It's the growth curve again. It just runs that way.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it always. I've seen this a few times. I've been through the AM Cube, and it's always very revelatory. But to just hear it again, and it brings it down like a tough thing, like people at times that can often feel like you have to rely on a gut instinct. It gives you a blueprint, to use that word, of how we need to build if we want to get to a certain place.
And you might need to move some people around.
Yeah.
And I never want to use this thing as a weapon. I actually went into one business and you could feel the resistance. I asked for an all staff.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on here, but you know, I'm genuinely a friendly, helpful guy.
Yeah.
And this thing's non-judgmental.
Yeah.
And somehow people had heard I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
So I asked for an all staff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, 2 things you need to know. This isn't a weapon.
No.
And I'm not a weapon.
Yeah.
Like, it's all good.
Yeah.
Like, and by the time you explain it, this really is a way that you can, certainly in an exec team, because these are all C-suite jobs, you can start to understand how you best structure this and what happens when you have some bits missing. But even at individual level, it starts to speak to how somebody's going to feel more fulfilled.
Yeah.
Like, so when I sit with staff, which some people ask me to do, I'm like, let me just help you be even more fulfilled.
Yeah.
And understand that we all have to do stuff in life we don't want to.
Yeah.
But there's probably some stuff. I tested somebody who was up here, like almost at 99 on people.
Yeah.
Now, I already knew the answer.
Yeah.
Because you can't test up there and this not to be true. But I said to him, do you want to be about spreadsheets? You know, spreadsheets is content. Spreadsheets is matter. Spreadsheets is down here. It's what people like me like.
Yeah.
You know, I do my thinking out loud through PowerPoint slides.
Yeah.
I don't do it with people. I do it with slides and a cup of coffee. Because neither of them have feelings and they don't talk back. And I'm like, talk to me about spreadsheets. He said, Jonathan, I can't swim. I'd rather jump into a swimming pool than open a spreadsheet.
That's funny.
And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
The thing is, your job needs you to open the odd spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to find a way to do things that aren't your sweet spot. It's
Yeah.
not where you're energized, but it's just necessary. Nobody's going to ask you to stay there, but you are going to have to visit.
Yeah.
And you can you can get back as quick as you can.
Yeah.
And it just allows, same firm. I spoke to somebody who was having a bit of a tough time, and an hour, that was all it was. And in the following 3 days, he wrote 3 weeks worth of business.
Wow.
And they asked him what happened, and he said, oh, Jonathan just told me to be myself.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Amazing.
you can't be anybody else.
No, it's
not
true.
properly.
It's true. Well, look, that's been amazing. And I mean, maybe it's a follow-up podcast to get into some of the stuff that we've not even discussed yet. But where can, if people want to reach out, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I think we'll probably put some contact details in the bottom when this goes. You and I talked about whether I could do some sort of balanced scorecard or scorecard. which with some help I can probably do that, because
Yeah.
there's some generics. There's obviously unique and specifics
Yeah.
to
Well, I
people's...
think, I mean, not to go down a rabbit hole, but you talk about business being in 3 states. We've talked
Yeah.
about A plus B plus C being more than D. Just tell us quickly about those 3 states, and I think we do a scorecard around
Yeah.
what those states are and where someone is.
Yeah, so as I walk around, and what I do when I go into people as quickly as possible, I'm like, let's have an honest conversation about here.
Yeah.
Where are you? And then let's talk about there, and let's work out how you go between the two with checkpoints.
Yeah.
Because you've got to check in, otherwise your autopilot kicks in. And so when I get to here, I find businesses, and if somebody wants some extra homework or reading, a guy called Jansen did a thing called 4-Roomed House of Change, which is somewhat behind this. So I find business in one of 3 states. It's like they're in renewal,
Yeah.
things are going well, they're asking their questions, they've got momentum,
Yeah.
but they're staying ahead of things.
Yeah.
So to any of this, it feels a bit counterintuitive
Yeah.
to pull somebody in to say,
We're doing well.
we're doing well, it's not gone wrong.
Yeah.
No, part of this, and there's one more thing which helps people map their psychological safety within their teams. Part of it is I can probably help you understand why it's going well,
Yeah.
so you keep hold of those things, and it might show you the odd thing. That's a far-sighted leader that
Yes.
is willing to pull somebody in at that stage
when things are going well.
when it's going well.
Yeah.
And that's a tough sell. You know,
Yeah.
I've tried that a couple of times. It's not always worked. You have this middle section where leaders intuitively feel that they're losing traction.
There's some dissatisfaction.
There's something.
Yeah.
They're not always quite sure what it is.
Yeah.
You know, the wheels are on,
Yes.
but it's not all tickety-boo. And at this point, some of these, where are you in the growth curve? Is
Yeah.
it your diversity or psychological safety? You've got some people in the wrong seats. There's a few things that you can have a bit of a play with in that. And that is more like, okay, if you don't do something, it's going to keep going wrong and it's going to get worse. And if people
Yeah.
don't address that, then you end up in the 3rd stage, which is the wheels have come off and now you're at full-blown intervention.
Yeah.
Like, it gets messy,
Yeah.
it gets a bit bloody, bigger changes than were necessary.
Yeah.
Because if you'd have started doing things here, you've got some more time on your side. You can make some more adjustments. Up here, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
he's like, just got to go and got to go quick.
Yeah.
And you just don't have to get there.
Yeah.
But people seem to find themselves there every once in a while. So
Yeah.
I think that a scorecard that says, where might you be on that?
Yeah.
Maybe some,
Ask some
adjectives
questions
or
around it, of
words
course.
that say,
I think that'd be really
That
useful
could
and really
lean into that.
helpful for people.
yeah, and then my contact details. I can't do everything for everybody, but
Yeah. If you meet the 4 criteria, you're in.
if you meet the 4 criteria,
You're in.
send me an email and I'll come and have a cup of coffee for free, which is what I tend to do as a first step anyway.
It is. This podcast is called Uncommon Ground.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask this at the end. What makes you uncommon as we finish?
Yeah, I think in my approach, more emphasis on the people and the qualitative stuff than strategy and data. You need that, but I think the ratios can get out of whack. So I think that might be a bit uncommon. I don't know if I'm uncommon. I just know I'm me. So that would be that. In terms of me as a person, I'd hope what's a little bit uncommon is the degree to which I am willing and want to give myself away.
Yeah.
Like leaving a legacy, not so that somebody names something after me or writes something nice, just because I believe I owe it, don't owe it. I believe I have the opportunity to hand something better on to the next generation. You know, we are generational beings. And so maybe what's a little bit uncommon is, and as I've got older, it's always been there, but as I get older now, you know, my mortality clock ticks a little louder. Like I've probably got another 30 years. I'm in reasonable shape. My aura ring thinks I sleep well, etc., etc. But I just want to be about finding the right people to invest in, who can do something with it, who can scale it, and then will be willing to pass it on, which again is part of those character traits with the leaders I'm looking for. You know, humility that says it's bigger than me, and courage that when it's really necessary, they're going to knuckle under and get it done.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
No worries.